Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the webcast Digital Privacy, Always on SSL, and Perfect Forward Secrecy. I would like to hand the floor over to our first speaker, Jeff Barto, Trust Strategist at Symantec. Jeff, please go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. Hello and welcome to everybody who has joined us today, wherever you are around the world, from the mountains to the prairies, from sea to shining sea, and everywhere in between and beyond. I really appreciate you taking time in your day and for joining your colleagues in participating in our discussion. My name is Jeff Barto, and I am a trust strategist and website security advocate here at Symantec. We are the first, original, and leading SSL certification authority. It is our duty to help you put security first by keeping you up to speed on what's new and now in security and trust. And it's my duty to help you receive the maximum value for your investment and your trust in us. I am passionate about driving and inspiring fundamental trust within IT and IS, but also on a very public internet. I believe that we are all in this together. To that point, because it's important to experience multiple points of view and communication styles, joining me today will be two co-hosts and cohorts, industry experts in their own regard. I'll introduce them in a few minutes. I also mean we're in this together because that includes you too. Your perspective is valued and important to us. We want to hear from you. Please respond to the poll questions on the right side of your screen. We're going to close those polls towards the end of the discussion, so you've got plenty of time to answer, but of course the sooner the better. As we roll through the discussion today, feel free to pose questions to us. There is a Q&A panel there, and if you've got questions, ask them. If we have time in critical mass today, we're going to handle those questions at the end of our time together, or at least afterwards via email. Last but not least, if you need time to digest this information, or if you want to involve your peers who couldn't make it today, we will display contact information prominently towards the end of the presentation. And in the meantime, we are recording this presentation. You can get a link to the recording. I believe it is tomorrow. So for now, let's dive in. We are going to go back in time, everybody, to the summer of 2013 when this guy happened. This is Edward Snowden, and you can consider Snowden what you will. Patriot traitor, trust whistleblower, national security threat, wherever your mind space is on Snowden. Really, what's of concern today and how things have shaken out in the intervening time is not really as much about him, but about what he revealed. This. Snowden revealed government programs, multiple government programs, which shook security and trust professionals really to their core. Using typical RSA-based implementations of HTTPS, a, quote, well-equipped organization, unquote, could record encrypted data, then decrypt it later if they gain access to the relevant private key or keys. And it's that last phrase, if they gain access to the relevant private key or keys, that's a critical ingredient in making the worst case scenario for real. So eventually came the details. We're going through time here a little. The NSA of the version of the program was called Bull Run. These are the actual screenshots of the PowerPoint slides from NSA and from, on the right, their British counterpart, GCHQ. Please note that these are in the public domain. We're not sharing anything that hasn't been shared publicly already. The NSA slide on the left overviews the mechanisms that are involved in the Bull Run program. And I'd ask that you call your attention specifically to the term Common Internet Encryption Technologies and to the yellow and black lines running from left to right, right underneath those words. What you see there is a representation of the SSL handshake that we all know and trust, and what appears beneath them represents the Bull Run program's mechanisms. The details of those mechanisms aren't as important as the methodology which they represent. Now, before we go any further, you'll notice that I just use the term SSL handshake. I want to make something clear here. In the entirety of this presentation, we're going to use the term SSL interchangeably with the term TLS and vice versa. Now, if there's going to be a necessity to call out specific versions or nuances of TLS or SSL individually, my co-hosts and I will do so. Otherwise, let's just assume that when any of us says SSL, we also mean TLS, and when any of us speaks of TLS, we probably also mean SSL too. Okay, so moving on in this picture, looking from the NSA slide on the left to the GCHQ slide on the right, bullets 2 and 3 on the GCHQ slide confirm the bull run activity, but in whole, it's more vague regarding the efficacy of the bull run program. This, of course, led to some initial hysteria. The immediate reaction to this tangled fact with emotion, making us wonder about the current implementations of TLS and SSL, especially making us wonder which implementations are best, which ones are safe. Are we good here now and ongoing? How's the situation going to change? What's the new now? Effectively, we were all wondering, is SSL and TLS, are they on the ropes? So fast forward some time again on timeline here, and after the initial shock and awe subsided, reason began to settle in, and experts began to uniformly agree that the sky was not falling, and still is not falling. Crypto and its math was and still is intact and not compromised. However, best practices came to light which demonstrate the full capabilities of TLS and SSL, which we really need to pay attention to as an industry. These are some of those best practices, specifically aimed at mitigating the threat at hand. And I put these in very loose terms, but they're worth stating. Encrypt everything. Avoid the ability for keys to be reverse engineered. Use the strongest available encryption that's most computationally affordable for your environment. And of course, last but not least, hurry! Make sure you're doing this right away. The stuff we've got to act on because of the news and the immediacy of things. Now, backpedal just a bit here. Obviously, I've used the bull run matter to call attention to the need of advancing encryption and security and trust. That's not the only matter heightening awareness and defining what the new now is. So even if you take Snowden and the NSA and Bull Run and GCHQ out of the picture, there are all manner of current concerns which require all of us to keep at the top of our game and constantly advance it. For instance, the convergence of big data and US and EU intentions regarding privacy and security, and industry movement towards things like RSA 2048 and SHA-2 and beyond, and so forth. That makes right now the right time to introduce today's speakers, my co-hosts and cohorts. So let's do that. Let me introduce and welcome Craig and Stephen to the discussion. Craig is the Executive Director, Founder, and President of the Online Trust Alliance. The OTA's mission is to enhance trust online and empower users while promoting innovation and the vitality of the Internet. Craig, welcome to the discussion. Craig, say hi.
Good morning, and thank you for hosting us today, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your participation. Waiting patiently is Stephen. Stephen is the Chief Architect at Akamai Technologies. They are the leader in delivering, optimizing, and securing online content and business applications. Stephen is an inspiration in that he's a self-taught software engineer and developer. He specializes in low-level server-side development optimization. He's in his weeds. Man's on the job and is living this real time. Stephen, welcome to the discussion.
Thanks. This is good to be here. It'll be a fun discussion.
Thank you so much. You're going to hear Craig and Stephen each more prominently in just a bit. I wanted to get you used to their voices now. They're going to serve as our subject matter experts as we move through today's topic. And that topic is what we're all smiling about in these photos. So let's go over what today's agenda looks like. We're going to very lightly cover TLS and SSL in a nutshell, just to make sure that we're clear on the very basics, highlighting the twin roles of the technology. We're going to move on from there to a discussion around always-on SSL, where I'm going to be calling on Craig as a subject matter expert. From there, we're going to head into a discussion around perfect forward secrecy. This is Stephen's bailiwick. And then we will tie together how these technologies will combine to create a significant and a material fortification, I use those terms carefully, which establish some of the current best practices to defend, quote, the common internet encryption technologies that we mentioned earlier. So we're going to head into TLS and SSL in a nutshell. You probably all know this in the audience, but it's good to just make sure that we are all refreshed on this. And it all starts with the lowly SSL certificate. It's that file which to human eyes is jam-packed with gobbledygook. But when you place it on a server and use it to enable an encrypted session online, it activates a fundamental common internet encryption technology. I love reusing that terminology there. This takes data in motion between server and browser or server to server and turns it into, frankly speaking, more gobbledygook, which is decipherable only by the sender and the recipient as long as best practices are used. That said, there is a second role that is often overlooked in SSL and TLS, and that is the role that we forget all too often, and that's the role of validation. It is the validation aspect which enables the things that we as professionals, as well as consumers, and average, ordinary, everyday internet users, which ultimately we all are, frankly, to understand that a server or a page or a site is really the page or site we expect to be on. And via some well-recognized and visual cues over time, we can draw assurances from them. I'm specifically referring to what we call trust indicators, like the venerable padlock, the green address bar that you see when extended validation SSL is in use, or trust indicators and trust marks, okay, like the Norton Trusted Seal. Site managers, brand owners alike have discovered that the usage of these indicators send warm fuzzies to people and browsers and servers and everybody visiting those sites. That contributes towards increased trust, increased stickiness, sometimes higher conversions, business measurable uplift. Good stuff happens when you what I like to call exude trust. So that said, that makes this a perfect time to discuss how the usage of TLS and SSL and these trust indicators can be used in an entire usage experience. Okay, for that, we're going to refer back to the agenda. We're going to segue out of the basics of TLS and SSL and move on towards always-on SSL. Before we go there, let me make a quick reminder that we do have our polls open on the right side of your screen. Please do participate. If you have questions, you are welcome to submit them at any time. We'd love your participation in that. So let's go there into the realm of always-on SSL and where it fits in this grand picture. Even before the recent conversions of security and privacy concerns, there's been a stair-step of best practices that's been established in demonstrating trust via SSL and TLS. It starts with using HTTPS, using secured cookies, avoiding mixed content. Mixed content is where a page incorporates both HTTP and HTTPS content and triggers nasty warnings on web pages. We've all seen those errors, a mixed content warning. And imagine when you're average user, what does this mean, much less what do I do? Okay, avoiding those kinds of things is all in the category of good. But to move up beyond that and exuding trust and driving trust on your site and into the user's experience, your site can add EVSSL to further demonstrate in a very visual way that this is the site you expect. You're in the real place. Encryption is happening. Everything's on and working. At the top of the heap, however, speaking of everything being on, is always on SSL. That's where I'd like to go in introducing and calling up Craig here and getting us used to his voice again. Craig, can you walk us through the basics of what always-on SSL is?
Well, great, and thanks for a great introduction and great material that you set up the discussion on. Let me take a step back and really talk about what is the problem that always-on SSL is solving and why I think it's extremely important for businesses. Today, you know, as users are using a mixed match of devices and using logins and access through public Wi-Fi places, the concern of third parties to be able to capture and sniff the data is extremely high. there's been some results and published research has shown that this is actually happening in the wild. So really, always on SSL is intended to really specifically encrypt all the data in the connection between sites. And the great news is leading sites, is, as the slide mentions, social sites, Twitter now, Facebook, many commerce sites such as Bank of America and others have actually recognized the importance of encrypting the entire connection between sites. And really, it's relatively easy to do. As the slide points out, it's end-to-end. And it's really securing all that from any data collection by third parties. We're also now seeing Google search is now being forced HTTPS, or is always-on SSL connection as well. And it's really, I think, a best practice. It's one thing that we're really promoting. A few things that does come up. Again, it's the same level of encryption, but it's encrypting everything. And one of the areas that was really very interesting, we saw many areas where the logons were not actually encrypted, but the rest of the transaction. And so again, always-on SSL covers everything. Really, I highly recommend it, not just for consumer sites, but also to B2B. There is some challenges on mixed content, I will point out. And it's not a technical one. It's one where if you do have a site with mixed content, and the previous slide pointed out that the user can get a warning that there's mixed content on the page. So it is a best practice for sites to kind of address that and making sure that all the content that they're serving is SSL encrypted there. So that's the key points there.
I apologize for interrupting you. That's kind of the twin message here. Encryption, always on SSL, these other indicators show that encryption is happening, but there's also a layer of you want to tell the customer that they're in a trusted experience, and you want to do everything that you can to show that everything's good from as many aspects as you can. One is over time in the experience as you go through a site that everything is through SSL, but to the point of mixed content warnings, that any error that pops up kind of erodes what you're trying to establish in the trusted experience. What would you say about that?
Well, that's a problem. I think it's a bigger problem that unfortunately we even have on self-signing certificates, where users and primarily in the past in academia and companies have self-signed, and effectively some cases we've actually taught users to ignore those warnings. And bypass that. And the same thing on the mixed content. Again, your typical user, which is not the person that's on this webinar today, doesn't understand what that what that means. And that's something that's an important point that from a brand protection standpoint, in EV SSL is very good. It gives you that trust indicator, the green bar. Always on SSL is great because it's really protecting the data throughout the end-to-end. But if you're having these warnings pop up on your site, you can actually confuse the consumer or really get them perhaps even to walk away from your site. So again, it's just a key issue. Again, you need to look at the mixed content. How is that being handled from third-party sites or perhaps other servers?
Great. Thanks for going there. Please go on.
So I think these are the key points here. Again, we talked about cookies, and I think as we look at the end-to-end consumer experience, SSL is a key part of that and the foundation of what we're doing today. And again, we're seeing the primary sectors that really should be thinking about this in the banking sector, the e-commerce and social sites that again are more and more encrypting the email communications through always-on SSL, whether it's Gmail or whether it's Outlook.live as well. So I think we can probably go to the next slide.
Okay.
And why we really think this is important. And getting back to Jeff's points is we need to look at the end-to-end experience here. And when we've actually done a fair amount of assessment using some third-party tools with Qualys and High-Tech Bridge, and looking at the weak side of implementations on the server side. And one of the concerns that we've seen is the misconfiguration of SSL servers. And I think one of the learnings that we have is that SSL is extremely easy, but it's also extremely easy to misconfigure. And in our investigation we've looked at about 1,000 leading commerce sites, it's quite often the issue that it's not being monitored and maintained. And so I think the key learning here whether it's EV-SSL or always-on SSL, this is not a one-time implementation. It's something that site owners need to continually monitor for changes as well as adoption of best practices. So again, we're looking through here the amount of breaches that have occurred, not just the target ones, but we're seeing of weak server-side controls, and a lot of that is SSL. So if you want to go to the next slide.
Sure thing. It seems like that in saying that this is a good opportunity for catch-up in not only completing an environment's security picture, but also just in refreshing on what the new standards are. What are people doing to communicate trust on their sites? What technologies are they using? Please go on.
Yeah, actually, that's a great lead-in, Jeff, here to this next slide. Annually, the Online Trust Alliance, we do an audit analysis, which is a composite analysis of brand protection, security, and privacy controls. Excuse me. So this slide takes a snapshot of our data that we published last July, or last June, July, and looking at sectors. And so we look at the first segment of what is their overall SSL site security score. So in the green bar, you see 87% that was led by our members, but more importantly, where are some of the other sectors going? And so the Navy one is the leading banks. They're all tied around 85. So that's a good score. If we drill down to other best practices, we look at who's adopting EV-SSL. And so if we look at the top 100 banks, 60% of them. Why are they doing that is a question that I get asked all the time. And I think the banks have been compromised by phishing and lookalike sites, so they've recognized the importance and the business value of having the trust indicator of EV-SSL. So we're seeing that grow among multiple sectors. So again, the highest level there. Again, lower in other segments, such as the Internet Retail 500, which is in the yellow.
Right. It's interesting here, Craig. There's industry mandates, CA browser forums, so on and so forth, baseline requirements, what have you, that makes that adoption of 2048 and usage of 2048-bit keys not surprising. That's like no doubt. That's table stakes almost.
Right. And reality is this was done in June. And for a background in this, Department of Commerce had published a directive that said as of January of 2014, sites had to move to 2048. So we wanted to take a quick look 6 months ahead of time, where were we? And then obviously, as possible, we want to then communicate to those companies that perhaps they need to upgrade their certificate. So it'll be interesting when we run the analysis this year to see if we're not 100% everyone.
Got it. Let me twist the question here for a second here. That part of my brain says that what you just covered is as an initiative, as a mandate, a requirement comes along, adoption will actually precede it by quite a bit. You saw it there 6 months ahead of the deadline. We're already in the 90s, generally speaking, for 2048-bit keys. Could you make the same argument that not that EV-SSL or always-on SSL will be a requirement that we know about so far, but that there is kind of a leadership thing. There's a certain vertical or site or type of business or type of operation that is leading the way and demonstrating the utility of it or the implementation of it for others to follow.
Absolutely. And you start off the slide talking about Snowden, and again, some people have different views on it. I will say, as a result of that, it has raised the awareness and sensitivity across all sectors and decision makers about the importance of protecting data, and whether that's data that's stored data that's in transit, or in this case, websites. So I would suggest that in the last section of the slide here that shows 61% of the banks who've adopted always-on SSL, that we'll see a spike. Excuse me for my cough here. But again, so I would hope that, again, always-on SSL, and we have some white papers that we'll touch on in a minute, but leading sites have done it with minimal impact to server resources, and the implementation is not as difficult as one might think. So I think we're going to see that. And again, I think there's other factors, whether a mandate or in this case, external threats that are compromising data today.
Okay. So obviously these are not all the best practices. These are the ones that you evaluate at that moment in time. What are there other best practices that you would point to or that OTA would evaluate?
Well, yeah, the summary score, I mean, it looks at a lot of things like what level of TLS implementation, are you vulnerable for a beast attack and other things. So we look at a lot. So that first bucket includes about 15 or so criteria. You know, so here's a good example of using one of the tools that we work with, and that's from SSL Labs. And it's providing a score on looking at certain areas here. So, for example, one of the things that we find over and over is sites that are supporting TLS 2.0. And I think, you know, it's a good example of businesses not recognizing that just because something's out there, there may be vulnerabilities. So the common issues were sites that did not get maximum scores, that had misconfigured and had supported the highest level of TLS. A lot of mismatch certs, and then clearly in other areas that we're able to do by crawling sites, cross-site scripting errors, iframe exploits and such, again, 1024 certs. So these are some examples here. And again, these are as of last year. I think what's really important is the bar is going to continually raise. What yesterday's best practices may no longer be sufficient. And we're certainly seeing that in SSL. And again, we're certainly seeing that, again, the business and technical reason why always on SSL is so important. And on the next slide, I actually highlight some of the changes that we are looking at. We need to be looking at sites that are supporting TLS 1.2, and we also want to look at rewarding and giving additional weighting to sites that are moving to, for example, SHA 2. So we're going to start to see that in our analysis that will come out in June for leading websites, and then in September for mobile applications. We're going to be looking at how the data is being transmitted, how it's being kept secure in these areas. And I guess the last 2 points kind of tie to our next speaker a little bit. I think one of the things is we can't, you know, lay dormant, and we need to be looking ahead. Last year we talked about ECC, elliptical curve cryptography, has great promise, great productivity gains that sites need to be thinking. And then the obviously perfect forward secrecy, a lot of buzz on that right now, and I think again it's another thing that I encourage people to start thinking about, and then the next speaker will actually give you a little more drill down into what it is and why you should care. Excellent.
Craig, so Craig is a busy guy working with all manner of organizations in driving fundamental trust on the internet, often called to Washington to work with his connections there, and we're hearing him paying for all that busy work in his voice. So thank you so much for bearing through it and getting through that despite the coughing and what have you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time on that, Craig.
No problem. Actually, last point here, and I appreciate you throwing up the slide. We have a white paper, and we have a tremendous amount of resources in, I think, 4 or 5 languages as well about the business value and some of the tools. So the URL is https otalliance.org there. And you'll note that we have both an EV SSL certificate, and we also support Always On. So we try to walk the talk, so to speak.
I love it.
And Jeff.
A lot of what you saw in the previous slides where Craig was looking at server ratings and what have you. You saw a little icon there for the trust honor role that OTA promotes, is really towards the goal of driving trust on the internet and making sure that along with it goes security and what have you. That is a rating and therefore a compendium of the sites that you can see in action doing it right and the degree of rightness. So I welcome everybody in the audience. Please go use the OTA as a resource as you figure out what's right for your environment and how to move forward in completing that trust picture beyond just the encryption standpoint. That said, I want to refresh real quick, give a quick time check. We are at the bottom of the hour. We're about right on time. We are talking today about digital privacy and how you can expand and exude that through Always On SSL and Perfect Forward Secrecy. Joining me today are Craig Spiesel, and Stephen Luden. I want to remind you before we go any further, please participate in the polls. They are on the right side of your screen. Also, if you have questions for us, please post them. We will probably get to them at least at the end of the presentation, if not back to you by email. I see a couple have already trickled in, and I do appreciate your participation in the presentation as far as that goes. Look, at the beginning of today's chat, I mentioned that there are several best practices for the new now. Always on SSL accomplishes the best practice of encrypt everything. It's time to understand what the next two are and how they take shape. And those are avoiding the reverse engineerability of keys. I should have stated that in a different way. And using the strongest but most computationally affordable encryption. Okay, so for those, Craig from the OTA queued up the topic of perfect forward secrecy, and I want to go there and in turn reintroduce and hand the reins over to Stephen from Akamai. Stephen, welcome back. Let's get you familiar with your voice again.
Great, thanks a lot.
Take us into this idea of forward secrecy and where this comes from, where to go and what to do.
Great. All right. So I had to promise to avoid math and acronyms. So, I think I'll be able to avoid the math, but acronyms are going to creep in. I'll do my best to be explicit, though. So forward secrecy. Why don't we go ahead and go just right there? All right. So I couldn't avoid Alice and Bob, though, and I was able to find some early pictures of Alice and Bob back in the school days, and they were big note passers. So, but they knew that their teacher would find the notes and their friends would find the notes, and so they came up with a code. Now, this code would be similar to an RSA static key exchange. They had a very, very secure code, and they felt good about it. Now, their friend Eve was sitting there and, unbeknownst to them, copying all of these encrypted notes, knowing that someday she would indeed be able to crack that code. And one day, after much work, it was maybe about 15 years later, you know, computing caught up, and she was able to crack the code. And all the sordid details of Alice and Bob's school relationship came out. So go click through. So if they had been using forward secrecy, this would have seriously helped Alice and Bob. Now, you may say, why is this a big deal? Why does it matter? Why is me worrying about something that I said 15 years ago a big deal? But then you want to ask yourself, how long have you had the same bank account number, credit card numbers? Maybe something you said 10 years ago, 15 years ago is important. Maybe we're talking about time frames of a couple years here with the advances in computing that we're seeing. So the ability to have something be encrypted and have that be safe for the foreseeable future is incredibly important for the overall integrity and safety of our online communications. Next slide. So what is it? And the really simple way to put it is it's creating a new key material for every single session. So in the Alice and Bob scenario, if they came up with a new key every single time they passed a note, then Eve may someday down the road have been able to decrypt one of the notes, but she would not have been able to therefore decrypt all of the notes. So this is a critical thing to make you feel more secure, make your customers feel more secure when they're communicating with your web presence. Now, the key technology that's used in this is Diffie-Hellman key exchange, which is it's all about trying to solve the discrete logarithm problem. That's about as mathy as we'll get right now. And it is if done properly, it can create this property of forward secrecy. So then when is forward secrecy perfect? Now, I'm going to put perfect in quotes, and usually when I say perfect forward secrecy, I'm putting little air quotes around perfect, because ask any cryptographer, and anyone who says something is perfect or unbreakable, they're probably not a real cryptographer. In fact, Whitfield Diffie last week at RSA was up on stage talking about how he regrets, and he can't remember if he invented it or not, but he regrets the term perfect forward secrecy. But think of it as really, really awesome and 100 times better than what we have today, forward secrecy, and that will make your crypto guys feel a little bit happier. So technically, when we talk about forward secrecy or perfect forward secrecy, you want to use what's called ephemeral Diffie-Hellman. Now, in the world of acronyms, you'll see that as DHE, Diffie-Hellman ephemeral, or you'll sometimes see it as EDH, ephemeral Diffie-Hellman. Don't ask me why they put the E at the end, it's just the way it happens. So with ephemeral Diffie-Hellman, if you get the keys for one session, and because they are created for a specific session and then purged, they're gone, they will not be able, you will not be able to decrypt other sessions. And that's the key bit that we're going after here. Next slide. All right. So it sounds great. Let's go turn it on. So the first thing you're going to run into is that Diffie-Hellman ephemeral is really computationally expensive. So if you naively approach turning on Diffie-Hellman ephemeral on your website, you will see basically your handshakes can be 3 to 5 times more expensive than your traditional static RSA handshake. And that's 3 to 5 times more than a 2048 RSA key. If you haven't made the leap from 1024 to 2048, which you should have, but if you haven't, you're talking about 8, 9, 10 times more expensive. So that can have a massive effect on your CapEx spend, depending upon the size of your presence. At Akamai, we put a lot of work into optimizing our TLS footprint, and this CapEx number is a hugely important thing for us. So we've done a lot of work to try to figure out how to make it more efficient, and those tricks are available to you as well at home, awesome. Or I should say at office.
So let me make sure I got this here. Using the migration from RSA 1024 to 2048-bit keys.
Yep.
Doubling the size of the key, and in the key exchange and the ensuing SSL handshake and what have you. Again, using TLS and SSL interchangeably.
Yep.
You're doubling the necessity for processing power.
Yep.
And there's there's a computational cost there to do that. Your servers and all the processors have to work harder and longer. There's probably time delay. But I would imagine there's probably material costs that come along to the point of CapEx performance. There's that too. Now you have servers are heating up, and therefore there's cooling and power aspects of this too.
Yep, the costs are all around you. In fact, to put it even more in perspective, the 1024 to 2048 leap is about a 6x cost in computational cost, heat, and everything around that. So, whoa. You know, these are big deals. Crypto, the whole point of crypto is to be hard.
Got it. Of course. However, hard on your environment is a different consideration. I think the need there is how do we get there for security purposes, but at the same time not have the marshmallow roast and these computational as well as CapEx expenditures. Right.
So you segue. Let's segue right into the next slide.
Okay.
So the great news is that when I said naive, what I meant by ephemeral Diffie-Hellman is expensive, but elliptic curve cryptography, I put new in quotes. It's been around for a long time, but it's just recently kind of come into common usage. And there is a variant of the Diffie-Hellman ephemeral called elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman ephemeral, or ECDHE. Now, the bottom line here is solving the elliptic curve problem is easier and faster than solving the discrete logarithm problem that you have with Diffie-Hellman, and therefore it is cheaper to do for your servers. On the other side, it is significantly harder to brute force it. similar, which makes the actual necessity for having your keys, they can be smaller.
Okay, so wait a minute, I've got to say, I came from marketing. I'm educated in marketing, and I'm used to saying you get this, more at a lower cost, and I can't help but that happening in my head. This sounds like we're going towards something that's in theory, but I kind of want to see the facts. Like, is it really, or are we being for real here?
All right. Well, my next career setting Ginsu knives will come up soon. So pop over to the next slide. All right. So this has been tested and profiled and worked on. This is where I could go deep in math. I will skip that, but just say that there are a lot of very smart people out there who have worked on trying to optimize these curves, these elliptic curve implementations, to try to get them to be as inexpensive as possible. And when I say inexpensive, I use this in the CPU cost, which leads to a CapEx purchase, which leads to higher transactional time. So expenses all over the place. Now, the great news is they have gotten the cost of the elliptic curve Dixie helmet ephemeral down to within about 15% of the performance of the standard static RSA handshake. Now, 15% is more. There's no doubt about that, but it's a heck of a lot better than 400% or 300%. You know what I mean? So it puts it within the realm of we can do this. We can just put this in the next year's budget, and now it's something that we can absolutely build out on. So, and there's also no reason to expect that this won't improve even more over time as people spend more and more time on it.
Sure.
All right. Going forward, so you have implemented ECDHE, elliptic curve Dixie helmet ephemeral. You have your perfect forward secrecy, quotes or no quotes. And then NIST is saying, well, you're going to have to move to 4096 keys from 2048. And that is another massive increase in cost in your infrastructure to go ahead and handle that key size. Now, this is where another variant of elliptic curve comes in. So this is orthogonal to perfect forward secrecy, but it's an important thing when you think about elliptic curve and how to go ahead and deal with your costs. Elliptic curve DSA, you guys may remember DSA from years past. Elliptic curve DSA is a replacement for the traditional RSA certificate. And now, because of the properties that I talked about earlier, where you can have a smaller key size for the same sort of bang to your buck that you get with RSA, as RSA goes ahead and scales in this sort of geometric fashion, the elliptic curve DSA keys can scale at a sublinearly or subgeometrically to the RSA keys. Now, what that means is today there's a benefit to using ECDSA. There are some problems with it of browser support and adoption, but those are being worked out. But tomorrow, as you look forward to the needs of crypto getting stronger and stronger, ECDSA is going to be a massive win over RSA. I believe Symantec has a product today for getting ECDSA certs. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong.
We do. We'll cover that in a bit.
All right. Well, I won't steal your thunder there. So elliptic curve makes perfect forward secrecy a reality for you, something you can do at a very cost-effective way. And it also is going to future-proof your investment in infrastructure when it comes to dealing with the actual authentication portion of the equation, which is what the static RSA key provides today. So I think, and let's see, I have one more slide there, right?
Got it. I'd like to know, and this is the obvious. Okay, so we've gone from theory to application. We've seen the numbers, but is anybody doing this so far?
So it's becoming more and more popular. Earlier in the discussion, we talked about who's turning on always on SSL,
right.
always on TLS. Those same actors are moving towards perfect forward secrecy as well. So you can see it on today on Google. You can see it on Twitter. I haven't gone and checked my bank, for example, but I'd be surprised it's not on there, but I won't state it is until I've actually verified it. Akamai has perfect forward secrecy getting turned on right now. So all these guys are doing this and making the investment. And the desire is to have better cryptography, better protection. And if you want the cynical business view on this, better protection means more comfortable customers, which means more business transactions. So it is huge and important for our overall internet infrastructure to move towards something where people can feel confident and safe working in that environment.
Got it. Okay. And my heart thanks you for going there with the marketing spiel. I appreciate that. For the audience at hand, you know, I always look at a way at anybody in an IT or an IS environment to have a reason to go over to anybody in the marketing or sales department and say, I am delivering you stickier customers or a stickier customer experience or more this or better that or lower whatever you don't want. When I see performance gains because of an IT decision and it can materially impact a customer experience, especially in the area of trust, gotta say thank you. And for that, thank you so much for pointing that out.
Great. My pleasure.
Awesome. Okay. So it's always good to see, looping back to where we were with Craig, you know, are there specific industries? Are there, give me some customers who are doing this, give me the examples. And where I went to at the time is where on the adoption curve, at some point things become required or they become de rigueur, but there's also some leaders ahead of time who are responding either to a threat or just out of leadership stance in order to accomplish a business goal. We saw that here, but to some degree, Stephen just pointed out the same thing with regards to forward secrecy, to some degree ECC. Great. Okay, so I'm going to move on here one slide further, and of course I want to say thanks to Stephen for the great analogies. I love it, the very vigorous but engaging discussion. Not going too deep on the math, but we got the theory and the application as well as the examples down. Look, always on SSL allows you to accomplish the goal of encrypting everything. It's perfect forward secrecy that enable you to avoid the reverse engineerability of keys, and to use the strongest and most computationally affordable encryption. We point at the use of ECC certificates. A quote recently came in, and this is freshly minted, from our friends at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and I'm specifically speaking of Mr. Peter Eckersley, who is the Technology Projects Director at the EFF. I'm quoting him. This is in writing from them to us. Encrypting your communications with your customers, web, email, and everything else is the first defense that every firm needs to deploy against ubiquitous surveillance. After that, you need to make a list of the ways that encryption might fail. And failure to use perfect forward secrecy, or PFS, is right at the top of that list. So thought leaders in multiple directions are pointing to the advantages here, not only in a security standpoint, but a trust standpoint likewise. That's from the EFF, who's also in sync. Now, with that groan, I don't know what that was, but it sounded like a very hungry dog. Feed the dog. Symantec is the only SSL provider which delivers a full chain ECC solution. That means that all the routes, the intermediates, the end entity certificates in the chain are ECC certificates themselves. That delivers the maximum performance advantage of ECC, avoids the marshmallow roasts in your server room. Now, I mentioned, Stephen said, Symantec has a product here, right? Every premium SSL certificate purchased from Symantec includes an ECC certificate version for free. Okay, no additional cost. So please don't be fooled by the premium name moniker that you'll hear from other providers. They don't include full chain ECC, much less for no additional cost. Symantec's ECC routes are highly propagated. They're ubiquitous right now. Obviously, there's some kinks that need to work out with anything. We started working 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago, to deliver this advantage. It's leading, it's technology and capability, which you don't have to wait for. It's available and ubiquitous and growing every day right now. Okay. I kind of want to reset things, do a quick time check. We are 7 minutes before the conclusion. We are at a point where we can wrap up for today's agenda. I want to remind everybody that the poll is active. Please make sure you vote now. This is your last opportunity to do so. We want you to participate. That's one method of doing so. Another way is by Q&A. Any last-minute questions? We talked about today TLS and SSL in a nutshell. Always on SSL to accomplish the best practice of encrypting everything. PFS to avoid the reverse engineerability of keys, and ECC certificates from Symantec to enable the strongest and most computationally affordable encryption available. With that, I think it's important that we point out some resources available to you. Okay, you know, we talked a lot about capabilities, benefits, gave some factualization of that. Admittedly light on the how-to. Frankly, how-to is often a function of your own network architect or server admins, and not necessarily of a vendor support team. Nevertheless, Symantec is here to support you. We offer industry-leading support in time zones around the world, in multiple languages, by phone, chat, email, knowledge base. They're all staffed by Symantec employees, not outsourced contractors. Let us know how we can assist you with implementing best practices which are right for your environment. You also want to pay attention to these resources. And I'm old school about things. I'm a guy who actually still prints things every once in a while, and I also like print screen. So to remember this, obviously you can go download the deck and you can get that separately. I'm a big fan of the good old alt print screen on Windows or Command-Shift-3 on a Mac to capture stuff, just because I'm a moldy oldie and I like doing that. Great resources here on how we've seen forward secrecy implemented in different environments, or how to do it wrong. But also some great resources here alongside from the OTA with regards to Always On SSL and their data protection and breach readiness planning guide, and that is a 2014 minting on that. Okay, so let's bring it home. You are always welcome to reach out to us to continue the discussion. We are at a point where we're probably not going to be able to take many questions right here. We're just going to run out of time, and I apologize for that. But if you've asked a question, we will respond to you by email, absolutely. Again, I'm old school, so I believe in alt print screen and Command-Shift-3, but these are your contact methods for getting in touch with us. We want to hear from you. So you have an account manager at Symantec. Even if you don't, please contact us. If you don't have the direct contact means, you certainly can call the 866 number. You can go click to go.symantec.com/SSL or email us. That is a heinous email address, and this is exactly why I say, please print screen this. However, you can email us or call us or what have you. We would love to continue the conversation with you. Because we are out of time, I would want to thank you again for your time and your participation today, as well as to thank heartily today's experts, Craig and from the Online Trust Alliance, Stephen from Akamai, and our host, Lisa. Guys, thank you so much.
Very, very welcome.
Fabulous.
Thanks,
you bet. We are all in this together. I mean it. So with that, for Symantec, the original and leading CA, and on behalf of my co-hosts and co-presenters, goodbye, good day, and please stay safe online.
And this concludes today's webcast, Digital Privacy, Always On SSL, and Perfect Forward Secrecy. Thank you for attending, and have a good day.